So does that sound okay to you guys, Sonia?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. All right, then let's just go right into it. So, Jose, go ahead to the next slide. All right, so here's a list of task force members. This task force was created during the spring of 2020, so it's been about a 2-year effort. And I want to thank the task force members that are here. I believe there were 45 official meetings of the task force, and then for some of the subgroups, I would say dozens more, at least across the different subgroups. So go on to the next slide. So this is just a little bit of background on what the comprehensive plan for Reston currently looks like. The current comprehensive plan, the first part was approved in 2014, and then the rest outside of the TSAs was approved in 2015. And so if you take the current comprehensive plan and you project a hypothetical build out, the population of Reston would go from roughly 65, 70,000, what it is now, to 127 to 157,000 hypothetically. And that's depending on whether or not landowners chose to maximize non-residential, which would be the lower number, or to maximize residential, which is the higher number. Now, there's not on here another number that might be of interest, but this basically does not account for what's already been rezoned. And rezoned properties, if those were all built out, the number is somewhere around 110,000 population. So we're talking about really the delta between roughly 110 is what it's been entitled currently to those numbers right there. That's what we're talking about. That's, I would say, in play with this comprehensive plan. And you guys know what comprehensive plans do. So go ahead to the next slide. So these are the interim recommendations by the task force. Currently, county staff is taking a deep dive into these recommendations. Also, this is one of several engagements with groups that are either Reston-wide or are particularly well suited to provide input on this this comprehensive plan update. And we expect, in terms of the timeline, and we'll come back to that later, but basically the task force will reconstitute in the May probably timeframe, late April, early May, and then review the feedback from staff, feedback from meetings like this, and other comments, and then finalize their recommendations. Then through the summer, we'll have a series of more general public engagements. And then at that point, towards the end of the summer, staff will finalize their staff report, and then Planning Commission public hearing, Board of Supervisors public hearing later this fall. So that's the schedule, and we'll come back to that later. Any questions on background or process at this point? Okay, then next slide. So I'll turn it over. John, I believe, is this you today?
Well, it's supposed to be David Vanell and I, but is David on yet?
David is on. David, I see you there.
Okay, great.
Okay, David, take it away.
Okay, as soon as I find out how to unmute myself. Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Okay, well, be careful of what I say. A summary of the various chapters. I just got on, so I assume Walter explained this. We're going to start with planning principles, and the author of this was principally Tammy Petrine, and it discusses a number of things. It's high-level guidance for future development in Reston. It's trying to foster sustainable and innovative projects. and built on the following 10 or 12 principles: public involvement in development proposals, excellence in planning and urban design and architecture, phasing required phasing of infrastructure with development, roads, public parks, public facilities, et cetera, offering a mix of urban and suburban lifestyles throughout Reston, transformation of the TSA corridor. Reston is going to remain a vibrant business and employment center, as well as hosting educational and research activities. We'll get into that later, maybe with the economic development. Housing to accommodate individuals and families of all ages, abilities, and income levels. Connectivity and mobility is key throughout Reston, so multimodal transportation with vehicles, bikeways, pedestrian paths, linking all parts of Reston to each other and to the TSA. Recreation facilities and open space as a planning principle, health and wellness as a planning principle, and equity, inclusion, and community involvement as a planning principle. And heritage resources. Whoops, hang on. There we go. Heritage resources, the chapter was written principally by Chris Daniel. The chapter better encapsulates and recognizes Reston's diversity of known and potential heritage resources, and highlights opportunities for further identification of these resources and consideration of how to inventory those resources in the future. Calls for highlighting those resources, inventorying the resources. Documents known heritage resources in Reston, and especially involving potential for a conflict with future development, and provides a more thorough discussion of considerations and preservation incentives aimed to incorporate historic preservation into planning activities with Reston, for Reston. So that's heritage resources.
Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read what's on the slide. You can read that quickly, but I'm going to put a little more flesh around it. So the transportation chapter focuses on the mutual impacts of land use and transportation, especially in the TSAs, and focuses on the importance of transportation management to harmonize those two elements of land use and transportation. And there's a emphasis throughout on strengthening multimodal transportation by improving both facilities and services for active mobility modes like walking, biking, and so forth, for traffic, and also for private occupancy vehicles. And by using placemaking as something which will make those modes more attractive, especially the non-private auto modes, by having good signage and safe and attractive paths for walking and biking. And finally, attending to the environmental, community health, and equity dimensions of the Reston transportation system. And that was, I should have said, that was done by a team of Gary Maupin, Bill Kimmel, and myself. For public facilities, the chief author was Charles Colby. It covers all of those facilities maintained by local government or by nonprofits that meet critical needs and social service needs. It included facilities for government offices, schools, fire and rescue, law enforcement, health, libraries, housing for the homeless, recreation and entertainment, and water and sewer facilities. And it both inventoried existing facilities, identified future needs for growth, and recommended that this be done while adhering to the core principles stated in the Reston Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please.
Land use, written by Lynn Malston and several other task force members. The goal is to link Reston's planning principles, which we discussed a few minutes ago, as a guide for developers to use in their projects. Along with Fairfax County's design guidelines, land use chapter tries to establish an expectation of excellence in project planning, design, and architecture. And it focuses on existing conditions and on a future vision for the various areas within Reston. Deals with them individually, by the way. And the language in this chapter is intended to encourage the appropriate mix of uses envisioned in the TSA. For affordable housing, the purpose of this was to establish the fact that we need to grow affordable housing even more than we have been doing. So affordable and workforce dwelling units for those families and individuals who earn 60% and below of AMI, and also those who earn 60 to 80% of AMI for both affordable and workforce. Assisted housing for those in serious financial need, an expanded homeless shelter, which is already in the works, and an emergency facility for extreme weather conditions, dedicated housing for senior residents with lower income levels, development and expansion of missing middle housing, expanded county coordination and cooperation with government, nonprofit, and for-profit entities that are key players in affordable housing in Reston and the DC area, adaptive use of existing commercial properties for residential living, use of county-owned land to support development of multifamily affordable rental units, expanded use of public-private partnerships, including mixed income development projects, and the creation, hopefully, of a community land trust pilot program in Reston. Next slide.
The Parks and Recreation draft chapter was done primarily by Jennifer Juszczyk and Larry Butler. It tries to focus on the need to maintain our parks. First of all, that we maintain the parks we have and not lose any of them. But then as development and redevelopment occur, there will be a need because of new population to have new parks, recreation facilities, and open spaces, and to provide those collaboratively through public support, but also private donations and also proffers from developers. It also tries to stress that the TSA areas especially will need a contribution of recreational facilities and provision for athletic fields with sport fields as a priority, because the TSAs are going to be the major place where residential and also daytime business populations are going to grow. Environmental stewardship that chapter was done primarily by Tammy Petrine and Bill Penniman, and it begins on a note of pride how Robert Simon has one of his foundational visions to make Reston a harmonious integration of neighborhoods, of natural spaces, and of a downtown, a very new vision of the new town. And then most recently, Reston was in the first 13 communities worldwide to be named a biophilic community, which stresses living in harmony with nature. And so those are kind of the inspirations. It focuses on what that means in our watersheds, our lakes and ponds, our stream valleys and wetlands, tree canopy and native flora, specific streetscape requirements, green buildings, stressing the development of solar and renewable energy sources, noise abatement, lighting regulations to provide to prevent overlighting, both for humans and wildlife. And then transportation and oriented development also must have environmental protections. Next slide, please.
Public art, also written principally by Tammy and Bill Penniman. The goal of this is diverse forms of public art, including performance space, have been and must continue to be integral to Reston's identity, including Reston's commitment to equitably distribute public art throughout the community. All new development is expected to contribute in measurable ways to Reston's public art landscape, and Public Art Reston is going to should continue to perform a central role in promoting, coordinating, and maintaining public art projects. Reston's Reston's public art master plan should be the guide for that, and developers should make sure that they coordinate any of their activities in public art with Public Art Reston. Economic development, written by Gary Maupin. It's one of a couple of different chapters that are new to the comprehensive plan, and brings a focus on business and job retention and creation for Reston, to include both large and small businesses. Its principal vision is that Reston is a hub for global and regional business and innovation. In concert with other chapters it's in concert with other chapters in this plan to make this vision possible, including housing, transportation, parks, public facilities, et cetera, and it supports specifically the one Fairfax policy. The chapter has policy direction, and I'm going to just list these for you. Grow a sustainable and diversifying workforce, enhance appeal and built infrastructure in Reston to businesses, organizations, and workers, diversify Reston's economy, attract new high-value business, attract new and nurture existing small business, encourage the economic vitality of the town center, the TSAs, and the village centers, and promote high-quality educational facilities. Next slide.
Next slide, please.
John, do you see that one? Okay.
There we are. So
Yeah.
community health, as David said, is also a new chapter for the Reston comprehensive plan, but it's also brand new for any comprehensive plan in Fairfax County. And it's something which leading communities in the United States have begun to try to articulate. So the principal author here is Michelle Kimmel. And Michelle set out to make this, if I were to use two words, a holistic view of community health and an interwoven view of community health. By holistic, I mean it's the whole health of the human person, the whole well-being of a human person, physical, mental, and it's for all people who live, work, and play in the community. So anyone who is touched by Reston, we want them to have that touch be a healthy touch. And secondly, it's interwoven. That is, it's not just one element among others. It's meant to be one dimension of all of the other planning chapters. So there's a stress on, yes, human health care and services, but it also ties into healthy and active living through recreation and so forth, and transportation modes, healthy food systems, building green neighborhoods, having healthy buildings, and encouraging social cohesion, which is so important for social and mental health. And it also tries to interweave the notion of equity, recognizing that detrimental health impacts are most disproportionately borne by those who are underserved and underrepresented in our communities. Thank you.
So go ahead to the next slide.
Uh,
All right.
Were
Yeah,
you going to talk about equity or
No,
culture? Have I done
well,
that enough?
yeah, actually, you touched on it, I believe. So,
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to switch to the next slide. One thing that is not in the task force interim recommendations is something that's undergoing additional analysis right now, the concept of earned density. Some of you may remember something in Fairfax County we had until about 20 years ago called residential density criteria, where basically developers were expected to earn their density towards the high end of the planned density range. So this is taking a page from that, or at least exploring it, to see if in Reston, if there should be criteria for how developers should get to the maximum density allowed for in the comprehensive plan. And if so, what should those criteria be? So that's another area that a subgroup is going on. Love to get any feedback or comments on that, even though it's not part of the recommendations. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is the timeline that I mentioned earlier. We are in the task force has not finalized its recommendations yet, but we'll be doing so probably in the May timeframe. And then through the summer will be additional community engagement leading to public hearings at the Planning Commission and the board later this year. So, and I think that's the last slide. Let's see. Well, except for that, questions. So, all right. So wherever you guys want to start with questions, comments, and we have several task force members here that I think would be happy to answer or at least provide additional feedback on anything that is of interest.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You know, I think there's a lot to unpack with these recommendations. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to sort of meet with you all and ask questions and sort of start fleshing this out. I think from my perspective, as I was sort of digging into and I'm going to pause for a second because I'm not sure if I've introduced myself to everybody, but I'm Sonia Brehe. I'm the Northern Virginia Advocacy Manager for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. Just wanted to make sure. I know I've met some folks, but not everybody. I guess what I was going to ask initially is if, you know, as we try to look to see through the recommendations where there are changes to the current comp plan that's currently approved. You know, normally when we go through this sort of comp plan amendment, there's a markup of the comp plan language, but this seems like almost like a total rewrite in some extent. So I guess I wanted to understand and see if there wasn't a way for you all to tell us what is changed from the current approved comp plan. I think as I was looking through it in the recommendations, if something is not mentioned in the recommendation, is it anticipated to be removed from the comp plan, or will it stay in the comp plan and only the recommendations are going to be the altered language? So I guess I just was seeking some clarification on what's changing and what that looks like and how we should be looking at this.
Let me point out, Sonia, if I may, one of the reasons why it was kind of a wholesale rewrite, and that is because of the way that the current, that is, comp plan was written. It was written over 2014 and 15, and it was written in two different parts. The first part, which was really the driver of the whole exercise, was the arrival of the Silver Line and therefore the development of the TSAs. And that was the focus. The rest of Reston came only kind of as an afterthought. So you had conjoined plans, but not a fully integrated plan. So one reason for the rewrite was to overcome that quirk of origin, if you will, from the previous comprehensive plan. So that's why it is what it is. So with that general statement, just speaking about transportation, since I was the chair of the transportation committee, I would say that we basically held to the last plan, but with an attempt to make multimodal transportation stronger, not by way of coercion, but by way of attraction. So to try to improve the active transportation modes, the transit modes, in a way that would make them a more attractive alternative. So that is one emphasis. The other thing is we scrutinized the so-called grid of streets, the local street networks surrounding or serving each of the 3 transit station areas. And we tried to make those more reasonable with less impact on surrounding community, and to function better both within that individual transit station area and among the various transit station areas. So those, I would say, are the 2 of the main things that we did in transportation. Does that help?
I mean, it speaks a little to the transportation part of it, and we certainly, I think, have more questions related to that. I guess I also would wonder, with regards to land use, you know, are there any planned changes to the land uses in the TSAs or certain areas from what is currently approved? Land uses, FAR, the FAR, different things like that.
I just don't know if.
Yeah, John, do you want to, or
Sure.
Gary?
Land use. Hi, Stewart. It's John Carter. We've met several times. Nice to see you again. You're a very effective group, and I always appreciate your seminars that you have and your comments. In terms of land use, the station areas are pretty much the same. So they're the highest densities areas. And we've been lucky enough to achieve a 50% residential and 50% non-residential within a half mile. And most of those projects are approved in various stages of moving forward. From a quarter to half mile, that's 75% residential and 25% commercial. We've pretty much kept that. And the whole notion, I guess in the broad view, even in the last plan, was to increase density around the transit stations and stabilize the areas beyond. And so there were a series of loopholes, I'll call them, in the old plan, which we have gotten rid of. Basically, out in the village centers, they're now right-sized. I'll call them. There are a few areas, particularly the multifamily areas, that are not within the transit. There's no increase in zoning. We pretty much keep them the way they are, because Reston is not mature enough to start thinking about redeveloping our older multifamily areas, and we want to hold on to those because those are really our source of, or one of our major sources of multifamily. David Vanell is there, who's worked on the housing chapter and tried to dovetail that and work back and forth with the land use chapter. And you'll see that the 2 are much stronger than the past. In the past, we had a pretty good inclusionary zoning process, although this one is significantly better. But then David particularly has broadened it out a little bit. and to talk about the multifamily areas that I just mentioned, but also some of the other ways that affordable housing could be achieved. And also this notion of the missing middle. Reston is filled with the missing middle, and what we want to do is hold on to that. What else in the land use chapter?
John, you want to talk about Reston Town Center North?
Reston Town Center North. So that's our main civic place. Let's see, I need to be careful what I'm going to say about that, but that is still a work in progress. It spells out that there are two main owners. The county is one, and then Inova Healthcare is another, roughly 50%. So quite a lot of housing density proposed for Inova. And then on the county portion, at least to date, is all the community facilities that were lacking or would be lacking in the long term. A recreation center, a new homeless shelter, a new library, so a major park would be as part of that, perhaps Robert Simon Park. So that's all part of it, and making that fit in, but it's a long ways from the transit. So the densities are not nearly as high as in the transit station areas, but connecting that better through the existing town center and over particularly to the Reston Town Center is the other aspect. There's a new grid of streets and a new open space area, recreation center, soccer field in that. And that was a departure from the last time. I would say this time it's a little clearer what the aspirations are for that. But that probably needs work. Anything else anybody can think of in land use? I think that's pretty much, I think this plan lends a lot of clarity that perhaps was lacking in the last plan. And what John Mooney was saying, linking, it's now a plan for all of Reston. It's all linked together now, better than the last time.
And if I could weigh in a little
smiling
bit,
there, so he's got something good.
if I could weigh in a little bit on affordable housing, the goal here, Reston, and you can verify this with John, but Reston and Walter, but Reston has done fairly well, maybe a little bit above the average of the rest of Fairfax County in providing affordable and workforce housing, including assisted housing. And my goal, or the task force's goal, was to improve upon that. So what we're proposing be done in affordable housing is an expansion in numbers and expansion in how it's done. I think we would like to see, we would not like to see all the affordable housing go into the TSAs. We'd like to see the affordable housing scattered all over the area, all over Reston, in the residential areas, through maybe redevelopment or some new development, perhaps, in the village centers, which provide, if you will, transportation hubs and retail hubs for various neighborhoods. And of course, in the town centers, we're looking at mixed income housing, which could give us an avenue toward avoiding the restriction that affordable housing has on building type, and put affordable housing, not just workforce housing, but affordable housing, into larger multifamily homes or multifamily buildings. We're looking to find out if we can move some of the existing commercial vacancies, vacant buildings, into affordable housing of some sort. I will say that I don't think it's any particular secret. I will say that the task force is not of a single mind on many of these issues, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing, because what will happen is we will come to an agreement with a great help from Walter and John's staff about how these things should be shaped. It's important that we connect all of Reston. It is important that we expand the bike trails, the walking trails. It's important that we cut down on single occupancy vehicle trips, and because it's important to route traffic around that doesn't have to go through Reston. It doesn't have to go through Reston if the destination is not Reston. So I agree with John and Walter that this is an improvement.
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about
Can I
Just
jump in
yeah,
fast?
a lot
Because
of things.
there is some, this is Michelle Kimmel. There is some disagreement, I think, too, on Reston has done a phenomenal job on affordable housing, and in particular mixed income housing. That was the plan from Reston from the beginning. Where we have not seen that is in the TSA. So there are quite a few of us who are very disappointed with the levels of affordable housing, specifically close to Metro, which would open up more economic avenues, especially for those with lower incomes. And so I will say that the disagreement there is that the TSA isn't doing its part. It's not doing what Reston expects. And so that's really where we want to see more work done. So that's a big difference right now, and one that we have to figure out.
Okay.
And that's also part of why we've worked on adding an equity chapter too, to really look at and question, are public dollars being spent in a way that is supporting the entire community, or are we instead pumping a whole bunch of taxpayer money into an area that is just really primarily building incredibly expensive housing that is out of reach for many people? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Michelle, yeah, go ahead, Michelle, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Crocker. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance. And there are a few things. Reston has done quite a bit of work in the affordable housing arena. Michelle, one thing that you just spoke about, putting more affordable housing in the transit areas, is desirable, but it's also one of the biggest challenges, because the transit areas are the places where the land and development is the most expensive. So you are taking those subsidy dollars and really having to allocate your whole bucket to doing development there. So I think the comment about making sure that affordability is spread in all neighborhoods throughout Reston is really important. And maybe maybe more thought needs to be given to the transit system that will connect those affordable places throughout Reston to those activity hubs or to actual metro centers, as opposed to putting the development right at the metro center. Now, that's not to say that there shouldn't be any affordable housing at metro centers. The county has policies currently, the workforce units, that are 60 to 80% of AMI. And so there are some affordable units that are located in high density and transit areas. There was a conversation about multifamily being where a lot of affordable housing is located. And I think one area that we all sometimes overlook is, as those rents increase in market affordable housing, that housing is no longer affordable. So understanding where we are losing affordability in units that are not dedicated affordable housing, meaning they have some sort of covenant or restriction on them. One of the ways, frankly, to preserve affordability is to look at those older buildings, if they are in need of maintenance, If they are poorly maintained, you may have owners who don't have the resources to put money into doing that. So what some jurisdictions are looking at is redeveloping those sites, bringing all those units back to that site, but also increasing density. And I know that is a hot topic everywhere, but that is a way to preserve existing affordability and to add more affordable units.
We have an interesting example. We did not do a lot of that, the increase in density and hope to get affordable housing out of that. But we have examples of existing developments which were developed, excuse me, slightly under their existing density. And this one development, they had a swimming pool there and some open space that's no longer in use. So what we're doing, and that's just the example that you're talking about. Their infrastructure is beginning to fade a little bit. They have some problems with their heating, ventilating equipment, a little outdated, and the system is outdated. Some of the windows and things like that are not up to speed, and they're concerned about the affordability of that. So what we're doing is allowing a small amount of additional density, and then the dollars that would be earned from that would go towards the retrofit of existing multifamily housing. I think that's a useful example. I will say about the TSAs, prior to this comp plan, we had a fairly, it was 16 to 20% of new development would be in the affordable range. The only problem was the affordable range was thought to be 80, 100, or 120% of the annual median income. So without changing the percentage, we've lowered those tiers to 60, 70, and 80. Which should do much better. So as much as 20% of the new development will be affordable. Also, and we didn't really talk about this a whole lot, but there are projects in the region that I like, and I think you're familiar with them. Chevy Chase Chevy Chase Lake project that has affordable housing. And what's possible to do here in Reston is many of those larger many of the developments around the metro station are very large. They're multiple phased. They have a lot of housing units. So it would be possible for the county to help with either the financing or maybe some land, other tools to produce that 80-20. So you'd have 80% market and 20% affordable, perhaps in the lowest tiers, maybe even below the 60%. So there's a lot of possibilities to be able to do that in the TSAs. Basically, we're going to be close to doubling the population in Reston, an awful lot of it in the TSAs. So as Michelle was saying, we need to have the TSAs keep up. And the county is also very good at building affordable projects, either on their own or in partnership with other developers. And it would be possible in the TSA areas, given their large multiple buildings, to be able to do that. But that's the approach, and we're much better now than we were under the old plan. Other thing I'd like to squeeze in there, if I could, and I'm sure you're focused on this, is our jobs housing balance. We're going to be about 2.5 to 3 times 3 jobs per household, which I thought was appropriate for the Dulles corridor, since that is probably a little bit of a job heavy there, but not too job heavy. So we're about, as you know, balance is 1.5 or 6. And so we'd be about 2.8 or 3, which to me seems appropriate in the Dulles corridor, since we'll be importing workers probably from surrounding areas, Drainsville, portions of Vienna, Franklin Farm, to come here. So anyway, that's the discussion of affordable housing, as well as a little bit about the jobs housing mix.
And Michelle Crocker, if I may, David Vanell again, something that I didn't mention in the comments about affordable housing, we spend a good bit of time talking about preservation of existing housing and replacement of housing that and help with landowners that have affordable housing that is in disrepair. So we are focused on preservation, and we're focused on proper kinds of replacement of those of housing to make sure that there's at least a 1-for-1 replacement. The other thing I will say is that in relation to the idea of urn density, which is not a fully fleshed out theory yet, the current process of bonus density for affordable housing is not going away. There will be, for example, in residential areas, I think the bonus density is 8%. That we're calling for 8%, which is countywide. In the village centers, we're calling for a 10% bonus density minimum, with ability to go to 14. And with the TSAs, it's 12 with the potential of going to 20%. So we don't want to put all the affordable housing in any one location. We don't want to build just a building. The best process is to make sure it's spread around the neighborhoods. So spread around the entire part of Reston. So.
This is Stewart from Coalition for Smarter Growth. Following up a little bit on this affordable housing, and we touched on it briefly. Public land is a great opportunity. With the public land and even hospital land in the town center north area, how much additional housing are you supporting there, particularly affordable housing, where we could get at 50% AMI and below, maybe even 30% AMI, if I'm correct?
Well, the housing so far is 940 to roughly 1,200 new housing units in that area. And if you just go through the inclusionary zoning process, that would be, help me out, David, that 12, 16 to 20% of that would be in the affordable range, not in the lower tiers. Now we have a small amount of existing housing in there that's in the lowest tiers, I guess.
If I could jump in the health chapter, we also have put forward one vision where hopefully Inova will stay and expand their presence in Reston and include as part of that specifically more designated senior affordable housing. And then we have also done a good bit of outreach directly with Inova to encourage them to, as they're looking at this property, take into account the community needs, and specifically their community needs the assessment that they do for the area. And the number one issue was affordable housing. And to recognize that they have an opportunity with this piece of property to provide more and to do more than they've been able to do with affordable housing on their other properties, and to consider something that would really directly improve the health landscape of Reston, and specifically on senior affordable housing, but also broadly, just if we're going to be putting a lot of density there, make sure that it is significantly more than just the minimums required.
And
Yeah,
Stuart,
and
let
what
me jump
about
in.
the-
Yeah, just real quick on the county-owned portions there. We can do a lot more than just inclusionary zoning and planning. And we are, in terms of our planning for redos of our public facilities, I would say stay tuned. In about a month or so, you'll probably be hearing an announcement, at least beginning of the consideration of a proposal relating to the rebuild of the library, the regional library. So yeah, we can do a lot more than just inclusionary housing on the county-owned properties.
That's great, Supervisor. That was exactly what I was going to ask is, well, what about the county-owned property that's right there, and what can we do? So I look forward to hearing what's going to happen with the library for sure. I did want to touch on some of the transportation aspects to go back to that. There is a lot of highlighting of the need for multimodal, improving PEG connectivity with transit to get folks, to reduce vehicle miles traveled and so forth. But I'm also seeing in the recommendations some changes to the level of service where, taking away the reference, I believe, to providing level service E in the TSAs, and level of service means, the better the score, the ABC, the more it's moving cars, which is inherently counterintuitive for those who are walking or biking because it reduces the amount of time they have to cross the street, or you pick up the speed of the cars, which safer, slower speeds is better for people who are walking and biking. And wide parkways are very, very challenging and create barriers for biking and walking. So I'm concerned in seeing some of the changes to the level of service, particularly in the TSAs. I think there was some reference to it also in other areas. So, I guess the question is, what we really do need level of service E in urbanizing areas. There was also references to road widenings, which I get from a driver's perspective, it keeps traffic moving, but if you're really trying to get folks out of the cars and moving around by other modes and giving people choices, we really do need to think about all modes. Road widenings make it unsafe and somewhat untenable for people who are trying to bike or walk. And you've seen that around the Wheelie Reston station already, that we're trying to retrofit it after the fact. We really need to be proactive in ensuring that it really is safe. So I don't know if you want to speak to a little bit about that. And the other thing I noticed is some I know I see transportation demand management mentioned a lot in there, but there doesn't seem to be the specific goals and percentage reductions and things like that is currently in the comp plan. So I guess I wanted to touch on and hear from the task force, thoughts around why you're changing the level of service, and it seems sort of taking away some of the goals with regards to TDM.
I'll take a first shot at that since I was chair of the Transportation Committee, and it sounds, Sonia, as though you were eavesdropping on our conversations. You've highlighted three of the most lively discussions we had in the task force. I'll start with road widening. We did maintain the road widening recommendations that were included in the current plan. We did not eliminate any of them. We actually added a marginal amount of additional road widening, but many spoke about the same concern that you did, that if you build it, they will come. And so I want to acknowledge that, if you will, putting it positively, creative tension or disagreement among the task force members about how we should handle that. One of the drivers on road widening I need to mention is that, as you may be aware, there was a long-term study completed in 2021 called it's the Fairfax Springfield Franconia Parkway study. And as you know, the ultimate goal is to make that whole corridor all the way from Route 7, nearly all the way in the northwest, all the way to nearly all the way to to I-95 in the southeast, a 6-lane parkway corridor. So obviously much of Reston is part of that. And so that's one reason why that particular road widening is in there. Concerning LOS, we had lively disagreements about that. I think people we tried to do consensus, but in the end we ended up voting with majority votes on many of these things. And I think those who were for getting rid of LOS, any reference to LOS was because California did it, but actually California did it only for the purposes of environmental attainment, they did not get rid of it for regulating congestion. But anyway, that was one of the concerns. The second concern was that LOSE in the TSAs was so low that they said it's too low, and therefore we don't want to give it a hallowed status. So those were the arguments. But anyway, I will just say that those were lively discussions, and the same thing happened with a TDM. People were skeptical as whether the county could achieve the TDM goals that it had set out in the previous plan, and so the majority voted to drop it completely. So anyway, we've been in. The nice thing is we've been in dialogue with Fairfax County DOT throughout the process. We know that they don't agree with the task force votes on some of these things, and we will continue to have dialogue with them. So that's an honest answer, but you were either eavesdropping or clairvoyant.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I will just urge you to think about the design standards for walkable, transit-oriented communities. They need to be safe for all users, and we just have to make sure that's what we're envisioning for these communities. I also wanted to touch on transit. I think, we talked about Reston Town Center North, and really the need to connect some of these TOD areas that are outside of the immediate transit station areas. Just because they're not on Metro Rail does not mean they're not transit oriented. I think we know that. If we can get the frequencies up on some of these buses that really provide better service to more densities in that area, I think all the better. I think we really need to, and I know that there's been improvements to the Reston Herndon sort of connector service, but a lot of that was just budget neutral. But with some investments in really trying to enhance that, will go a long way to really giving people options other than cars. Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
No, I really agree with you on this, Sonia. And I think I don't know if it's so much more investment as it is a communication to get people in neighborhoods to get on local buses, to get them out of their cars. And there's a communication campaign and that goes along with the affordability and the reliability and the frequency of those little circulator buses. And this was something that was a big topic of discussion over 15 years ago when we did the Tyson's plan. So I think there's a lot of community education that needs to be done about the benefits, the value of getting out of your car and using that local circulator service, but people will not use it if it is not reliable and affordable. So
it's pardon me for jumping in. It's actually after 3:01. I know some of us have some other things we have to hop onto. This has been a really lively, substantive discussion. We probably should have scheduled it for at least 90 minutes, but we are going to be. I would encourage you, Sonia. You obviously have been reading this. I would encourage you to provide in writing. Any thoughts. The coalition, I know, is very experienced at these comprehensive plan updates, and provide that to the task force. CC my office, and also when we get back to the summertime and doing more extent, let's do this again, and would welcome any other ideas about who else we might want to bring into this discussion as we go through the more extensive public outreach in the summer. So does anyone have any final thoughts before we break here a couple minutes? Okay. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much. Appreciate it. Take
Okay.
care.
Everyone.
Thank you.